Movement. Tonight we are focusing on the topic of healing and, like the title said, to harness in the power of healing. So a quick introduction to myself if I haven't had time to properly say hi to you yet. I'm Hanli. I am a media personality, I'm a host, I'm a podcaster, and I'm someone who genuinely enjoys having authentic conversations around topics that really matter. And so being here to facilitate, co-facilitate an evening where we dive into the topic of healing is just completely lighting me up. So this is perfect. So a quick introduction to this glowing lady next to me. Everyone, this is Natalia Rachel. Not only is she a dear friend of mine, she's also a fantastic therapist. She is a speaker. She is the founder and director of Illuma Health. And more recently, as of last year, she is officially a published author, and she is responsible for this book.
Thank you.
The title is Why Am I Like This? Illuminating the Traumatized Self. So Natalia, thank you so much for being here and for facilitating this with me.
Thank you. I'm happy to do this with you. And thank you, everyone.
So just a quick flow of how today is going to work. Natalia will be sharing some passages from this book. We will be asking some key questions around the topic of healing, which, like I mentioned to a few of you, I would love for you guys to engage and join in the conversation. We will also be doing some meditations. And at the end, we're going to be closing off the session with an intention setting for the year ahead. All right, well, now that we're pretty much all here and we're all clued in, Natalia, I'm gonna give the space over to you and let you take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. I'm really grateful that you've chosen to spend your evening with us and explore the topic of healing. Healing, in essence, is all about returning to or unearthing our truest self. So much of the distress and dysfunction that we go through in the world is because we've forgotten how to do it. Largely, healing is really about learning to tune into, decode, and switch off so many of the coping and survival responses that have become part of who we are and have altered the way that we perceive, express, and relate in the world. And so as we heal, we learn to switch them all off. At one time, perhaps they've protected us and kept us safe, but they end up becoming the blocks to what we really need in order to heal, which is a deep sense of belonging with ourselves and each other in our entirety. Whether it's consciously or unconsciously, we're actually all trying to heal in every moment. So as humans, healing is an innate practice that happens all of the time. It's just that when it's unconscious, we actually take ourselves further and further away from ourselves and what we want to create. So we create all of this distress and dysfunction from an unconscious attempt to heal. When we bring our healing into conscious intention, we can more gracefully move towards the life that we want to create and to finding the purest version of ourselves. And what's really interesting is that all of us are primed to heal. And tonight we're all here with this shared intention because we might be curious about our healing or we have something specific that we want to learn about or explore. So it's really through our healing and beyond our healing that we learn to belong together. So with this in mind, this shared intention for this evening, I thought it would be really beautiful to kick off with a really short meditation to really honor that shared intention that we're actually all here for the same reason. Would that be okay? Just a couple of minutes? So before I invite you to turn inward, just take a moment to acknowledge this beautiful space and the amazing disco balls. What a bonus.
Oh, so cool.
So this space and the disco balls are our sacred space. This space is what's going to hold us in our healing tonight for the next 90 minutes or so. So just tune into it. And I also want to invite you to take a moment to acknowledge your peers, all the humans in this room that have come from different backgrounds, live different stories and perhaps have different dynamics and conditions in their lives right now, but all of us have joined, we belong, through this shared intention. What is it like to acknowledge that and to meet in this way? And now I invite you to actually close your eyes if it feels safe to, and if you prefer to just keep a downward gaze and let in a little bit of light, that's okay too. And again, with this shift in awareness, just take a moment to orient within the room. Be aware of where you are between the four walls, the floor, and the disco ball ceiling. And again, acknowledge your peers, all the other humans in this room, from different places with shared intentions, belonging in this moment during this time together. And take a nice breath in. And as you exhale, let go of the external world now and everyone else just for a time, just coming to you. Take another natural inhale and exhale. And be aware of your feet, whether they're on the floor or in the air. Be aware of the seat that you're sitting on. And just notice if you might like to give your body any small adjustments. Do you want to wiggle in your seat or move your feet or change the angle of your neck? Can you allow yourself that level of responsiveness? And what is it like to do that? And take a couple more breaths in. See if you can relax your toes. Can you settle into your seat a little more than before? Let go of any tension in your shoulders. Perhaps welcome a relaxation through your jaw. And allow your eyes to settle a little further back in their sockets. And just noticing what these small invitations bring to you. And take another couple breaths in now. Connecting to your personal intention. What brought you here? Your healing. And perhaps you might like to bring a hand to your chest or one to your belly, or cup them over your cheeks or over your eyes. How can you meet yourself and your intention? Whether you're meeting yourself in the present, exploring your past, or visioning towards your future. And just taking a moment to connect in with what's true for you. And just being with that with a whole lot of compassion and non-judgment. And just allowing that to clarify a beautiful point of departure for our time together today. And while keeping your awareness on your own intention and your own experience, at the same time begin to expand your awareness to all the other humans in this room, each with their own experiences, their own intentions, and at the same time sharing a collective intention to harness the power of healing. And just allow that resonance to really seep into all of your cells, individual and together. And take a few more lovely, nourishing breaths in. Again, expanding your awareness back to the room. Perhaps wiggling your toes or fingers or having a little stretch or wriggle. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes, rejoining us in the here and now. Beautiful. Thank you for engaging. You can already feel the energy settling and the resonance rising. And I'm going to go straight into a reading for the book. And if you want to, you can keep your eyes open, but if it feels nice to be inward during this or any of the readings, you're welcome to close them. The choice is always yours. This is a reading from Part 1, Chapter 5, called The Agents of Healing. When we experience this existential shift, our traumatized selves cannot so readily access the agents of healing we need, which are the very things we were missing in the first place. A, safety. B, belonging. C, expression and sharing. If we could follow a simple formula to heal, we would. And that's why no self-help book or step-by-step guide for healing is going to magically make it all better. They might bring us awareness, moments of epiphany, and concepts to mentally integrate, but there is no formula to follow. Healing is about finding our way back to ourselves and each other, stepping out of the warped reality where we reside and building a better one to live in. Sometimes it feels impossible, like we're doing everything we practically can to be the best version of ourselves and a good human, but something is just not shifting. That's because healing is more than practical. It is an existential journey of the spirit. Our trauma can leave us powerless without the foundation we need to exist peacefully and powerfully. In this state, we're not able to access the choice and agency we need to create metamorphosis, to change ourselves and the world around us. For our existential experience to change, healing needs to occur in a social context. Healing is dynamic. We need each other to recover. Because our trauma stems from harmful relationships, so too does the remedy to it. This is why no matter how hard we try to heal alone, it will be within the dynamic of safe relationships that transformation will truly become possible. When we have never been truly seen and heard without fear of judgment or harm, the remedy is just that. The remedy is in the root. So take a moment to mull on that. Before I pass back to Hanli, I just want to talk a little bit about the concept of safe space. So the invitation for all of us here is to engage together and share and ask questions and explore. And that's really only going to happen if we can co-create a safe space. Today I'm going to ask for 2 agreements to create that safe space together. The one is privacy. So any stories or emotions or experiences that are shared are to remain within this group and not travel into your next coffee or wine meeting. Do I get a yes for that? Yes. And the next is compassion and non-judgment. So whatever someone may ask or share, to watch our tendency to bias and separation and to welcome compassionately whatever's true for anyone else. Can I get a yes? Yes. Okay. Thank you for creating a safe space. Okay.
Well, that was a beautiful first passage to ease us into today's session. So when addressing the topic of healing, it's such a vast word, especially to each of us. It can all mean very different things. I think one of the questions that comes alongside with it is, number one, do we ever really heal? That question of, is there such thing as a final form? Is there an end of the road, so to speak? And so with that question, what's your answer? Do we ever really heal?
This is a question that I get asked the most. I don't believe in such a thing as a healed state. And the moment we're seeking some perfection or promised land, we actually block ourselves from truly being free and sovereign and empowered and happy. But what I do believe is that the healing journey becomes a lot more easeful and graceful, and that there are certain markers that we can begin to look for along the way. In essence, all healing is receptivity. It's finding more data points of awareness for our experience. and it's about having greater empathy and compassion for ourselves and each other. So it's not necessarily about fixing anything or becoming a different version of ourselves. So I don't think we truly ever reach a healed state, but I think we can look out for having a greater sense of safety inside us and in the world around us and in our relationships, having greater capacity to look at ourselves and others with non-judgment, and to be able to catch when we are triggered. We all get triggered, right? To be able to catch ourselves and not leak our dysfunction into the world. So we're going to talk more about relationships in a little while, but as I mentioned, healing is contextual and dynamic, and so the more peace and power we cultivate within ourselves, the more capacity we have to show up as the kind of humans that heal rather than harm. So our own healing actually creates social change.
I mean, I think I can speak from my experience, but every time I think I've reached, the peak of a certain mountain in my healing journey, I sometimes realize that I'm actually at base camp of like a huge future summit. And so I think the point that you made about, not having sort of this end vision to head towards in terms of any healing journey is the first thing that I would say I have to let go of in order to just release and surrender.
Beautiful. Yeah. I think as well, we get fixated on where we're going and what we're creating, and actually healing is about unpacking and delayering and making sense of. It's not about putting on more and more layers. So we kind of seem to go about it the wrong way.
With this question being held right here, is there anything that you guys want to add along or ask?
Don't be shy.
Okay, well,
let's just give it a pause, yeah? So sometimes it's through the silence that a little voice might say, me, I've got something to share. And the silence can sometimes feel a little bit uncomfortable.
Everyone's like avoiding our gaze.
What I might do then, if it's okay, is I'll read a little bit about receptivity. So receptivity is actually the goal. So the more receptive we can become to our own experiences and other people's experiences, the easier and swifter our healing journey becomes. I'm going to read, and I want to invite you to notice if you might feel like sharing or asking, but you're holding back. So that's a really common thing that happens to all of us. We're kind of like, oh, I've got something to say, I've got something to ask, but I'm not going to because I don't feel safe. And I want you, if that's happening for you, to challenge that little voice that says, oh, I better not speak. Because a big part of healing is learning to speak up and learning to inquire and learning to be vulnerable. So I invite you to explore that as I read. So I'm going to let what's happening over there happen and just start, okay?
Yeah.
So this is part 6, chapter 4, receptivity. Receptivity is the art of pairing perception and responsiveness. It is the essence of flow state. Our ability to perceive enhances with the more healing work we do. We become safe enough to listen more deeply to ourselves and to each other. Our ability to respond rather than react also increases as we gain a greater sense of sovereignty. When we truly feel safe inside ourselves, we can adopt receptivity as a way of being and a place to return to again and again. Here we are both strong and soft, masculine and feminine. We embrace ourselves and each other in all of our imperfection, with no need to brace against expression of any kind. Our receptivity is what keeps us mindful, present, and evolutionary. It is also what allows others to feel truly safe, seen, heard, and held in their entirety by us. This is the greatest gift we can bestow upon ourselves and the world. How's everyone going with that reading? Are there any reflections or questions?
Question.
Yes.
So just now you mentioned that like healing is more like being more aware of like data points, but like what's an example of that? Like how does the experience feel like or look like actually?
That's a great question. So often we just label ourselves as ourselves and others as others and the world as the world. So we move into this deep state of acceptance. This is just how it is. And when we do that, we lose curiosity and we lose inquiry. And that blocks our ability to make sense of our experience and begin to decode it and change. And so the easiest way to start getting more data points is to ask why, which is the title of the book. Why am I like this? Why are they like that? Why am I experiencing this way? Or why have we created this together? And then there are many, many questions that come from there. One of the things that's really important in terms of gaining more awareness and more data points is to understand our experience of safety or threat. And we'll talk a little bit more about this soon. But most of us are living in a prolonged, complex reaction to threat and also to exclusion. So we're trying desperately to create experiences of safety and belonging. And while that's unconscious, it then starts to present as us turning into people or experiencing relationships or dynamics that we don't really want. So healing is basically learning to tune into those experiences and understand, am I existing now or expressing or perceiving or relating now from an experience of threat or exclusion or not? So it's pretty complicated. Do you have a follow-up question? Thanks for being vulnerable and also asking the first question. Anyone else have a question or a reflection? Yeah.
You can focus too much on something that was traumatic, and then that can become a problem as well, right? It can kind of become a bit neurotic. And like, at what point does it flip between acceptance and realization of what's true to like kind of too much focus on a negative previous event?
I think we need to learn to be able to shift and master our awareness. So you're absolutely right that avoiding a situation is super unhelpful. So one of the terms that may go with this is burying our heads in the sand. So we are very good, particularly in this day and age, at minimizing, avoiding, and just pretending like something's not true when it is. And the main reason that we do that is because we lack the capacity to sit with and feel and process what's going on for us. So we need to learn to build capacity and also this self-trust to know I can look at that. And if I look at that, I'm not going to drown in it or spontaneously decombust. The other reason that we typically bury our heads in the sand or avoid is because if we truly look at something and see that truth, we will realize that we have to change something and that we need to become accountable for that change. And usually that change causes some kind of destruction or it upsets other people. And we are so desperate to belong and to merge and be accepted by others that we would rather bury our head in the sands than deal with relational dissonance. So that's one part of your question. The other part about coming to feel, I believe we need to feel and process our emotions in order to be able to move on from them and create something new. So it's an incredibly transformative process to sit with, but we also need to make sure that being in that emotion doesn't become a finite or total experience. So something that can happen when we say drop into our grief or drop into our rage is that we forget the existence of anything else in the present or any possibility of anything in the future. And so to begin to make it safe to sit with all of our difficult experiences and heal them, we need to learn how to dip in and to dip out. And so this is about mastering your skills of shifting awareness and allowing yourself to truly believe that something else exists. And so parts work, which there's quite a bit in the book about parts, is really good for this. When we drop into, say, a deep depression or a rage or something like that, it's often a part of us that is experiencing, or multiple parts of us. And what we need to learn to do is to get in touch with those parts, but also remember and be in communion or connection with other parts of us that aren't experiencing like that. Does this answer your question?
Yeah.
Is there a follow-up question?
Also processing.
Okay. I love it when people are processing. It means I'm doing good stuff.
Can you clarify once again what those three things were?
Safety, belonging, and authentic expression. So they are the remedy and they are the root. And that is the whole premise of this book. So really, healing's very simple. If you bring it down to that, that's all we're looking for, unconsciously or consciously. And the book is meant to support you to find it consciously. Yes.
So if you had that from your childhood, did you find that people start to repeat those patterns and they maybe form partners, like get in partnerships that maybe lack what they lacked when they were?
Absolutely. We're going to talk more about relationships in a minute, but we will continue to perpetuate cycles of the same thing because of the map that is given to us. It's a great one, and we're going to come to it soon. I'm going to talk about a little about the other areas. So the second thing is to understand that we are an amalgamation of our past influences. So the person that we become until we enter a conscious process of healing is basically learned. So part 2 of the book is called Prologue to Self, and there are 3 key parts to this part of the book. So the first is to understand attachment and attunement, so that need that we have when we're growing up to feel safe and welcome. And most of us didn't get that. That in itself is a really complex topic, but the way we learn to relate and experience in the world is learned through relationships. The second part is to understand the unconscious mind. So all of our minds have these programs called organizing principles that tell us this is good, this is bad, this is too much, this is not enough, and these people are good, these people are not good, this is what I should be getting. And all of this is also learned. And so my formative training as a therapist is actually as a hypnotherapist. And when I studied hypnotherapy, I learned that 90 to 95% of our experience is unconscious. So all of that programming and conditioning and bias and influence actually goes on to inform the way we express in the world. And so a big piece of healing is learning to tune into all of those organizing principles and challenge them and change them. And that is really hard work. The third piece in this part of the book is about the nervous system. And this links to what I was sharing before about understanding our experience of safety or threat. We could study a whole week together on the nervous system. But in essence, our nervous system is picking up signals all of the time. So right now, all of our nervous systems are learning from each other and either responding or reacting to each other. We're in dynamic. And what happens for many of us, especially if we didn't have access to those 3 things, is our nervous systems develop from a sense of threat and exclusion. And so that's what we know. So either we're always reacting to a sense of threat or exclusion, or we're trying to recreate feelings of safety and belonging. And so beginning to understand how our nervous systems might be recalibrated and experiencing threat or exclusion in the present when really there's none is a really big piece. It's a very complex topic. I'm going to pause because there's a lot more.
Wow. I mean, just hearing the statistic that you said that most of our existence is 95%. What is it?
Unconscious.
Unconscious. I'm really sitting here just being like, who am I? You know, like all of the layers that you just shared that kind of keep us really distracted from our true self. It just makes healing even more important to really peel back that, you know, never-ending onion to find out who our core is. We did talk very quickly just now about the topic of healing and relationships. But before I ask you the next question on that, is there anything more you want to share on in this space, or anything that you guys would like to share or ask in this space before we move on to the relationship topic, which is very big, you guys, so bear with us.
I'm going to share one more thing. So Those things I shared are important for healing, as is exploring the fragmented self. And there's one more really important piece, and that's understanding how every time we don't get in touch with or express our emotions or our true, authentic experience, we suppress it. So we pack it inside ourselves, and then they become lenses or colours in the way we experience the world. So we will see through the lens of grief, or see through the lens of anger, or through the lens of shame, not only ourselves or each other's. But a really big piece of healing is learning to tune in to all of those lenses or films or veils that we have over our experience. And healing them is a really long process of being and I guess allowing them to process and transform. But what we can begin to do is to notice them. Again, that's that receptivity and perception, and to relate or exist beyond them. So when we are not totally experiencing through that veil, that lens, we can see it, but we know that that's our past and that's something to heal, and we can become far more intelligent about the way we are then treating ourselves or other people. So those are all of the areas to explore.
Do you have something like just talking about that? I realized something that I do for myself is because I don't like confrontation and avoid certain situations. My coping mechanism tends to be to end up forgetting certain like bad experiences, and I think I've done it so well to a point that I don't realize that I have. Maybe it's like a delusion that I have, that I don't notice that I have anything bad going on in my life. And so I find it very hard to pinpoint certain traumas that I feel like I need to heal. So for somebody like me who doesn't even know where to start, how can I begin to realize certain checkpoints in my life that I need to start healing or addressing?
That's a beautiful question. Let's share a little bit about the concept of dissociation, because that's what you're talking about. When we don't have the capacity to be with or feel our experience or express a boundary or an authentic statement or expression, what we do is we dissociate. So we check out and we leave, because it's not safe for us to be with those experiences. And when we do that, not only are we suppressing our trauma, but usually we're not engaging in the world in an empowered way. So often there's a big link here to boundaries, and you can tell me if that resonates, not being able to set boundaries or ask for what we need. And so then it can feel a bit like life is dragging us along, when we're not able to create what we really want. Now, we check out and we dissociate for a reason. It's not safe to be here. And when we dissociate, there's actually changes to the way our left and our right brain are communicating. And this is survival. This is like our body and our brain are keeping us safe. And so what happens is the right side of our brain, which is connected to our felt somatic experience, hides everything. And it's so that our left rational cognitive side of our brain can make sure we keep going on with life. So we'll still go to work and we'll still do the shopping and all other things we need to do. But we end up feeling split. And so that's why somatic work is a really great entry point to beginning to heal from trauma and connect back into all of the places that we need healing. And somatic work is all about coming home to the body. And so the way somatic work works, and maybe you can speak a little about this in a minute, is that we slowly make it safe to come home, to associate, to somatize, to feel. And we start working with tracking sensations in the body. And then we go a layer deeper and we connect to very naturally emotions that might be there, or past memories that need a little bit of time or attention. So somatic work would be a really beautiful entry point for you.
Yeah, actually to share more on that, that was my first entry into therapy, doing somatic work with Natalia. And it was just so interesting and so insightful to really understand my body on a deeper emotional level, and to understand that our body houses so many of our memories and traumas, and to just create that space for all that I didn't even realize I had held on to be released. It was, those sessions I had with you, and also to learn what safety felt like in my body has been something that I've taken with me like for the rest of my life. So definitely look into it.
Sure.
Go ahead.
No, because like I've also been reading about other stuff like emotional agility from Susan David, where she talks really important to understand your own body and understand, but also the human reaction is also to keep you safe. And so sometimes a translation between your reaction versus what you really want is not necessarily very clear in your mind. So I just feel like how much of it should you listen to your body versus how much of it should you like try to make that translation between what you truly feel and what is the real issue.
Sometimes it's really hard to make the translation. So something that happens to many of us is that our wires get crossed, and this links back to the nervous system. So we might think our intuition is telling us, no, that would be bad, or I don't like that, that's not someone I want to engage with. But actually that's our threat response, and it's a perfectly good, safe, kind person. We're having a trigger from the past. And conversely, we might be really drawn to people or experiences or situations that are terrible for us, but because there's that miswiring going on, we get drawn to it and we think, oh, that's like a beautiful cupcake and I'm going to go and have that. So what is often needed when we can't make that link or detangle it is we need someone to be an anchor for us, and someone to help us make sense and start to detangle or repair that miscalibration. And so whether that is a therapist or whether that is a very good friend whose judgment you really trust, that's to be decided. But sometimes, like I said, it's relational. So if our wiring fundamentally tells us something's good or bad and it's all messed up, we need someone else to be that anchor and that point of reflection for the untangling to happen.
Also, guys, at the end of the session, Natalia will be hanging around. So if you have any questions that you want to ask, maybe in private or something you want to explore deeper, she's here to explore them with you.
With a glass of wine.
Yeah, after this, we all need shots. Okay, so for the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next topic, which, like I said earlier, is a big one: healing and relationships. Sigh. So the question is, how does our healing affect our relationships, and how do our relationships affect our healing? It's a big one.
It's a massive one, so maybe I'll see you back here next week, same time. We learn how to relate, how to belong, and how to love based on what we're taught, essentially by our family, but again, as you mentioned, all of these different layers. And if we are taught that love is shameful or harmful or exclusive or comes with all of these conditions and we need to twist ourselves into pretty bows in order to get it, that's what we will know. And so in the book I talk about this theory that we either unconsciously try to prove or disprove our experience. So we'll go generally in one of two main directions. Either we will continue to recreate the same experiences of love and belonging and connection as the dysfunctional ones we've been shown, or we will want so desperately not to have the same thing that will run really far in the other direction. That's what I did when I married my ex-husband. And it's unconscious. So like I said right at the beginning of the session, unconsciously we're trying to heal in every moment. We're seeking safety and belonging. But if our map for love shows us that love is in some way dysfunctional or lacking, we're going to either prove it or disprove it. And our relational dysfunction is probably the biggest way that trauma and pain continue to spread. So just as trauma travels through relationships, so does healing. So when we get to a certain point in our journey of healing, we become human resources, we become social impact, and we can learn to be incredibly intelligent in the way we support others through their healing. And that's essentially what a lot of my work is about using relationship as remedy, whether it's as a therapist, as a leader, or just a human that wants to love another human. And in the end, the relationship is both the root and the remedy. I might read a passage from the book while you take that in, and then we can have some questions on this one. It's a big one. So this is the only passage I'm going to share that's a personal passage. So the other passages I've been sharing are more kind of philosophy. But in the book, there's a whole bunch of my personal experiences. So here's a very vulnerable share. Oh, page 48 to 50. It's a longer one. My map for love showed me that love was physically abusive, verbally abusive, chaotic, shaming, and neglectful. Of course, as a young child, I had no concept that this was anything other than normal. I didn't know that I could or should expect anything other than volatility, violence, and deprivation. Because that was my map, I grew up learning to pack parts of myself away in order to minimize harm, grab breadcrumbs of approval and care, and stay poised in a state of hypervigilance, waiting for something bad to happen. I also learned how to self-isolate. It was safest to keep to myself. Looking back, I was so deeply traumatized and neglected, and was simply yearning for a safe place to land, and that yearning still exists in me, but now it's more of a gentle wish rather than a life or death need. The lack of love and care I experienced led me to choose a partner who was A, incapable of harm, B, wanted to care for and please me. When I met my husband, he became that safe place to land. He was and is a kind and gentle man that wouldn't hurt a fly, and he did care for me through some really difficult years. But I had come to the relationship from a place of deep need, from my little traumatized self, and I believe he came to it from his own unconscious attachment wounding. This is known as a trauma bond. In a trauma bond, one or both people are entering the relationship from their little traumatized selves. This means there are not two adults engaging in a connection, but young children who are desperately looking for connection and care. Trauma bonds happen a lot because so many of us have been harmed or neglected early on in our lives. The thing about trauma bonds is that the repair the little self seeks cannot be tended to in a romantic relationship. Over time, this often leads to feelings of resentment, aloneness, betrayal, energy drain, or even rage for both partners. My marriage had so much good in it. We were kind to each other, we cared for each other. We were companions as we travelled in and out of one hellhole to another. We built a beautiful life together. But as we approached stability, it became clear that it was all the caring and fighting and striving that had glued us together. It was a painful realization. Nothing bad had happened. We had just bonded from a place of survival. When there was no more need to survive, the connection became thin and unable to sustain. We drifted further apart. Our differences became more apparent. He knew it too. I am so grateful that we were able to talk about what was not there and take steps to graciously move on and renegotiate our relationship as co-parents. After we separated, my attachment trauma repelled me right into another trauma bond, but this one was incredibly abusive and harmful, a direct replica of my childhood map for love. It was after coming out of this second trauma bond that I started to heal my attachment trauma and find my true self. It has been an epic journey. I'm still learning about my relational self and redrawing my map for love. It is an endless and profound journey. I've learned that as we heal, we can continue to redraw the ley lines of the heart and nurture relationships that are truly supportive, rather than use them as attempts to plug holes in the heart of the traumatized child inside us. It's not until we learn that we have the power to go back and redraw this map that we can access the courage to say, I want more for myself, I deserve more love, and I'm going to do the work it takes to be able to receive it.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Vulnerable.
I think we're all just letting that sink into our hearts because I'm definitely feeling it.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful share.
Can anyone relate to those experiences that I've shared, either in a present or past dynamic?
I feel like that that was me. The whole thing. I done exactly the same. Like, got married to the opposite, and then switched and went the other way.
Yeah. And I think underneath it all, we're essentially looking for our mothers. Isn't that so strange? We're just looking for someone to merge with, and it's that merging that causes all the problems, because we stop being sovereign, and you can't be a baby merging with a grown-up, and in the end, it's just all kinds of wrong. And I think when we bring that deep, profound desire to belong and to merge with another to consciousness, gosh, it really takes us into epic healing states. So the level of grief that we need to feel is really huge. And in the book, there's a chapter called The Wound of Separation. And for me, this was a huge turning point in my relational recalibration or healing, to feel. In the book, I write about it like, imagine being a little baby alone on a medium strip in the middle of New York City. That's how it feels to sit with that wound, just alone and terrified and like you don't know what to do. And for me, it wasn't until I sat with that and then learned, oh, I'm not going to die, and I can be here now, and I can be independent and single, that everything began to change. And it was from then that I could stop not seeing red flags, stop going into things too quickly, stop accepting love that wasn't at all what I wanted, like breadcrumbs and things like that. So it's been a very life-changing process.
Yeah. Actually, I remember I was away and I was going through heartbreak, and I was having a really hard time in my healing process, and I actually reached out to Natalia. And I was like, I'm going through a really difficult moment, and I'm really alone, and I really feel alone. What's happening to me? And she used that imagery. She was literally like, you are a baby, and you are up for dinner at a zoo. You are on the buffet table. And it was true. And in a way, by just acknowledging and just taking the truth in that and realizing, like, this is my worst fear right now. I am so vulnerable. I'm so not safe. But I sat with it, and the worst happened. And in a way, because I let the worst happen, moving forward, I just didn't have that level of fear anymore, because it had already happened to me. But interestingly, and actually this is a question I have for you, because, from what you shared, it sounds like we go from, if we don't know the signs, if we don't have that feeling of we experienced the worst and we now know what safety is, if we haven't had that experience, and if we go from relationship to relationship, sort of seeking and, trial and error, and then the same one at the next, I mean, what if, how will we know when we find ones that are actually safe, when we find the ones that are right? And then when we do get together with the people we think are the right ones, if healing is continual, how can we trust that that also won't fall apart? It just feels like a lot of, loose ground to stand on from where I'm at.
Vulnerability is like being on loose ground all the time. So it's scary. I think we can only learn if someone is a good, healthy fit for us through a lot of time, and through learning how they continue to show up and how they handle not only their own distress but our distress. So you never really know somebody at all until about knowing them for 6 months. And there's some stat that says it's around 2 years when you will get a good handle on someone's character. But what happens is, when we're kind of desperate for that love and belonging, is we go right in, and we're like, we make up all these excuses. We're very good at fooling ourselves. So, I caught the good fish. I'm going to eat this one for dinner. And then we realize, oh God, that might be a bit of a poisonous fish. And we've already eaten it. And then we don't know what to do. So I think learning to go slow is really important, to learn, who am I really dealing with? And that actually takes time. And in order to do that, we have to work with what comes up, which is a sense of urgency. So we often will experience it as chemistry or eros, these just feelings of deep love. And again, it's that merging, or it's that inability to sit with ourselves on our own. And we'll do anything to psychologically convince ourselves that it is not those old threat things or trauma things, because we so desperately want to go there. And so as we build our capacity for containment and to sit with our feelings, we stop rushing, And when we stop rushing, there's more deeper layers of healing for ourselves to do. And then the bit you asked about, how do you know if it's going to last forever? You don't. So I'm a big fan of the work of Esther Perel. I don't know if any of you know her, but she suggests that most of us will have 3 marriages in our lives, and either they'll be with 3 different people or they'll be to the same person. So literally every decade or so you renew. Like, I'm a totally different person to who I was 5 minutes ago, to be honest. That's a little extremist, but to who I was 10 years ago, you wouldn't recognize me. And so when we're in dynamic, it's about continuing to revisit, do we still wish to be in a relationship as these new versions of ourselves? And some people will say yes. Some people will say no. Many people just close one eye and bury their head in the sands and stay in a dysfunctional relationship. Part of me wanted to do that, but part of me knew I wanted so much more for myself. And I think at least when we bring these inquiries to consciousness, we can be honest with ourselves and each other. And it's part of why there is now this wave of conscious separation or conscious uncoupling or divorce happening, because more people are realizing, hey, I've changed and our values don't align anymore. And it doesn't have to be this awful, horrible thing. So I'm so proud of my divorce. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever gone through. And my ex-husband is still one of the most supportive people in my life, and he's an amazing dad. And he's still one of the reasons, like, I can come and do these things or travel all over the world. So I just think if we bring this intention of just being real and having these hard conversations with ourselves and others, it doesn't have to be so life and death anymore.
We have one. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Natalia. I really loved that and learned so much to think about. So what brought me to this event is my interest in historical and collective traumas. And we spoke about personal traumas a lot today. But on top of that, most of us will be dealing with some form of collective trauma.
Absolutely.
And when I speak to collective trauma, I'm talking about Holocaust, slavery, and various incidents as such. So curious to get your thoughts on that in terms of healing, but in general, how that passes through from one generation to another.
Thanks for bringing this to the conversation. We need another 3 hours. Most of us have trauma in our lineage, depending on where our lineage comes from. There's some war, there's some oppression, there's some deprivation, and it goes on to affect those organizing principles. So, for example, let me speak to my personal experience. So my lineage does go through the Holocaust. And so my paternal grandmother, she lived just like Anne Frank. So she hid in a room for a long time. Then she dyed her hair and changed her name, and she got on a boat to Australia, where she then had my father. And there was so much secrecy and shame and deprivation and a lot of rage that was passed down to him, and a lot of guilt. And then that went through to another generation of us not being allowed to spend money, having to put our heads down and work really hard, being different to everybody else. So it does continue to pass down the line. And one of the ways that we heal it for ourselves is, again, to look through our history at all those different layers. They're all different layers of ways we are affected by people and culture, right? And to learn what organizing principles have been instilled in me and what bias has been instilled in me, and how do I learn to let that go. And often when we clock one of the organizing principles that's inside us, it will usually bring up some pretty intense feelings of grief and of anger and of powerlessness. So these are 3 emotions that I label the trauma triangle, and there's a whole chapter in the book about each of them. So while we have all these different stories of intergenerational trauma, depending on our lineage, what is actually shared for all of us is the fundamental emotional experience of trauma. So when we have suppressed trauma inside us, we will always hold suppressed grief, anger, and powerlessness. And so when I support others to heal, whether it's individually or in groups, we're coming to meet in this place where we're human. So we're looking at all the stories and we're exploring all the stories, but we're coming back again to that place where we belong, which is in our human emotional experience. Does that answer in a very succinct way? I want us to, for our healing, meet where we are human. That is my greatest wish, because I think we get lost in the stories. This was my trauma, this happened to my grandparents, mine is worse than yours, now you don't have a right to feel, I don't have a right to feel, and then we create cultures that perpetuate exclusion and perpetuate hatred. And so I believe for us all to heal, we need to acknowledge the story, but we need to meet at the heart. Thank you. Anyone else got any questions? Maybe as there's little time, we can just open up for questions, and then I might end with a short reading. Would that be good?
I think that would be good for the interest of time. But also, like I mentioned earlier, if you guys want to follow up with any more questions, you are free to do that.
Yeah, I'll hang around for about an hour.
Once we close up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Just had a question about the trauma bond that you talked about earlier. So would you say the onus is on us individually to, you know, heal, figure out those three categories that we were missing before we even enter something, just for it to be fair on the other party? But I guess, what would you say is the best way to go about it?
That's such a complicated question. I think it's more about just being aware of our shit, excuse my language. So if we're dating, many of us want to date and we want to connect and we want to have fun, but at least if we can look at our stuff and be honest with ourselves and maybe be somewhat honest with someone else about what we're ready for, that's a way to date beautifully. So I have a lot of clients that are on the dating journey, you know, looking for their first partner or a partner in the future, and I always tell them to date beautifully, like at least own your stuff, at least be honest. And no one is ever fully healed. So you're not going to get to a state where you are this like perfect little cookie, you know, that you're going to give to someone. So I just think it's about being honest and authentic. And then each grown-up can decide where their boundaries are in terms of what they take on. Because when you choose a partner, you also choose their trauma. And so getting to know someone else's past and all of their dysfunction and being honest about yours, that is part of healthy relating. And it's not so that we can try and heal each other, it's so that we can be more compassionate and begin to create those boundaries that are essential for healthy relating. So most of us are terrible with boundaries. And part of it is because we've never been taught how to do it.
I love that, because now that means that when you go on your next date, you can just be like, what's your trauma?
Do you know, so I would so love to see a conscious dating app. Like, I think it's an amazing business idea that to go on this app, you actually have to be aware of your trauma and you've got to be in therapy. And gosh, relationships would be so much better, I think.
Let's make it. Let's do it.
Okay, find me an investor.
What about when you flip the other way? So you're talking about trauma bonds, but what about when you go into an avoidance or, you know, not accepting relationships and turn away from forging true relationships?
Okay, thank you for bringing that. So one of the things that we can do to protect ourselves is just to not be intimate, whether it's with partners or whether it's with friends or colleagues, so we hold to ourselves. And again, it's a protective mechanism, but it keeps us blocked from the belonging that we crave. And my belief is that what happens over time is that it's not sustainable. And so usually that need for belonging and connection and intimacy, not having that, will develop into other things, whether it be mental health symptoms, whether it be strange little coping or avoiding mechanisms, and they might seem not so bad. So one might be to overwork. One might be to get really obsessed with working out or diet. And then there are more harmful ones like drinking, you know, or drugs, or just having lots of really dangerous unprotected sex. Like, there are all these things that we do to cope with that deep craving for belonging. Does that answer?
Yeah.
Is there a follow-up question?
How do you overcome that? What are the steps that you should take?
It's really hard. Often when we're kind of moving away from connection, it's because the connection is both something we crave, but we're also terrified from it. So dipping our toes in slowly is one way. So if we have more of an avoidant personality, we get flooded with too much connection. So we need to learn to have just a little bit and learn, oh, I didn't drown, nothing bad happened, and come back out into sovereignty, and then go in again and have a little bit more. So we can play with, it's called pendulation, so going into the connection, coming out of connection, and noticing what our threshold is, and learning to honor it, but also to challenge it. So we'll get to a place where I'm comfortable with like seeing someone once a week, but that's it, you know, and then it will be about challenging, well, what happens if I push myself to 2 days? And noticing, again, that responsiveness and receptivity. Notice, oh, I'm having a threat response, but this is my past. It's not needed here. So one of the things with trauma is that our past experiences of threat show up in the present when something familiar triggers it. And one of the pieces of healing is learning to unlink the past from the present. And so we need to use our mind to do that, but we can also use a lot of somatic tools to help our bodies feel safe when our nervous system is sending signals saying something's wrong, something's bad. So we've got to look at it from both a body perspective and a mind perspective. Yeah? Okay.
When you say that those vices that you just mentioned really is beyond just from a relationship standpoint, but when you say that just drives any of our avoidance for trying to heal?
Can you say a bit more?
Well, I mean, for example, like if we are, you know, drinking, doing drugs, or whatever that might be, any of these vices that everybody has their own vice.
We all do.
Sure, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be for masking any type of trauma, not just from a relationship standpoint?
Absolutely, absolutely. We use these things so as not to have to sit with and feel whatever's there. So it may not be from a relationship. Most stuff does track back to early life though, and that existential experience. But it could, for example, just be there's a huge pressure at work, you know, or, you know, we're on a life track that we don't really think is the right one for us. So we're trying not to feel what is true. So yes, and we all do it. And I think it's important to note it's normal. So it's not something to be ashamed of. And what we all need to learn to do is to notice, when are these coping mechanisms helping me to sort of stabilize and manage, because life is complicated, especially the last couple of years, right? And when is it becoming something that's actually harming me? And so to be able to answer that question is important. And the bigger question where you can really answer, am I hurting myself and am I sabotaging my life, is if I were to take this thing away, whatever it is, would I be okay? Maybe a little bit uncomfortable, but if I would then drop into like a deep depression or, you know, go and hurt someone or hurt myself, then you know there's something really big to deal with. So can I live without it or not?
Do you see a difference in the scope of healing between genders?
I see that the roots are all the same, but the presentation and the journey to get back to oneself is different. And that's because the different expectations are historically put on men and women. And maybe that sounds so un-PC in this modern world where we're all worried about DEI, but from when we were little, all of this wasn't present, right? So when we were young, there were different expectations put on us. So absolutely, the journey back to the self is quite different in my experience, and different things are accessible. But I guess that's also a generalization. I mean, you can already see, right, there's far more women in the room. Thank you, men. I'm always grateful when men show up, because historically, men are not as open to this. So you guys are way showers.
Woo!
Yeah, we love you. Yeah, there should be more men here, right?
Why do you think that is?
Because of how we have been conditioned. I mean,
Shouldn't cry, men shouldn't cry.
yeah, but you know, when I go and teach and speak in America, it's 50-50. It's 50-50.
All age groups, or is that a younger age group? Is this a bit of a demo?
No, not younger. So I've just been over there. I had a room of 300 people, 50% men, all sharing their stories, crying, putting their hands on each other's hearts. It's beautiful. Like, I was brought to tears. So also there's a huge cultural element to how trauma shows up and our readiness to heal. Singapore isn't the place you go for healing. It's the place you go to work hard, earn money, get ahead.
Well, actually, we started an event circle a few years ago at the start of COVID, and within 24 hours we had 20 people.
That's amazing.
Exactly. So I think there's actually an awful lot of men here who do want to connect and talk.
Beautiful.
It's just that you need some sort of a container to pour it into.
And then it's about how do you create that container, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that that's happening.
Partially, it's also awareness. Everything I've learned today is like brand new information. Half the terms I've never heard, and as you're saying, I'm like, holy shnikes. Like,
Yeah.
I can relate to all of this.
I'm so pleased. You know, this work is very new. It is cutting edge. There's, you know, trauma work has been around for a long time, but it's been very much on the outskirts, and there's been so much stigma around it. You know, a lot of what we hear is around connecting to our purpose, you know, and being successful, and like I said, creating more of these external layers. And so this work is pretty new. And so you guys are connecting to it before most of humanity, which is pretty wonderful. So thank you for being receptive. But it is such a journey. And I would love more and more people to opt into healing, because I just think the world would change. So I always say, heal your trauma, change the world. So once you've kind of done this level of work, then you can become incredibly intelligent, and every person you interact with, you are A, breaking cycles of bias and trauma and oppression, and B, you're inviting those three experiences for other people. And if we could all learn to do that, this world would look very different. So that's my mission with my work, is to help people get to there. And you know, that's generations away, so I can only do a small bit. Yeah.
So this point you mentioned around this conversation being more acceptable now, like I can't imagine this happening like in my mom's town, for example. She's like, what are you on about? So with the pandemic and COVID-19, I think when planes are halted to the ground and we're all stuck at home, there's nowhere else to go. So I just wondered, what is your hypothesis as to why this is becoming more mainstream in general in people's lives, but also within organizations?
Absolutely. The pandemic is like the silver lining of the pandemic is that we're finally turning towards our healing rather than away from it. So like you said, we were mostly plunged into deep aloneness, and all of those coping tools that we had, whether it was to travel a lot, whether it was to work like crazy, stay back at the office, whether it was to go out drinking with our buddies or be at the gym or whatever, they were taken away from us. So we were forced to feel. And then because so many of us didn't have the capacity and all the tools, which are all in this book, to sort ourselves out and to help each other, that's when there became these eruptions in mental health issues. So we have to talk about it. And as far as organizations go, I guess on some very basic level, they need their people to be well enough to work. That's a very sort of raw, sad look at it. That's the truth. So there is a lot of mental health stuff going on in organizations. In most, it is very box-ticking lip service type of stuff. But in some organizations, there is a real need and intention to support this deeper work. And so whenever I work with an organization, I'm like, this is long-term stuff. I'm not coming to do a 90-minute session. We're going to work together for 2 years. Yes?
I think social media has kind of surfaced the conversation as well. Like it was happening in small pockets, but now it's on a global stage. Because it's kind of unavoidable, right?
I think so. I think there are more and more people like myself who are stepping up to share. And one of my mentors said to me that me and many other people like me, it's like all of the work we've been doing our whole lives finally prepared us for this time in humanity. So we're ready, and we're ready to support others. I also think another thing that we're seeing on social media, which I don't think is great, is just this trend of trying to release or process on social media. And so it's like, because there's no ability to contain oneself anymore, people are just sharing their pain and their stories, but there's nowhere for it to go, and there's not that safe meeting. And so a trend that I see happening is either the sharing is triggering other people, or often when we share, we're wanting some kind of response unconsciously. And when we don't get that through social media, because social media is not the therapy room, we can re-traumatize ourselves by sharing so openly and then either not getting the response we want or getting some troll telling us, yeah, you're crap. So this is something that I would love to see shift over time.
But just to add to that, because I mean, that is a huge trend, especially with like Gen Zs on TikTok just coming online and just crying and recording themselves. But that's also looked at as a strength because people are seeing them and saying, oh, you're so brave to just put yourself out there so open and so vulnerable. I mean, isn't that sort of a good thing as well, that people are seeing that as an example? And I don't know.
I think it depends on, do they feel healed and met afterwards, and do they get better? So it's about what happens next. If every day for months or years this person is crying on social media, they're not getting better, nor are they empowering others to get better. So I guess this comes down to the concept of containment that we talked about. If they have a big release and then they're fine and they go on and create a good life, awesome. There's another piece though, is that many people are actually unfollowing people on social media because they don't want to listen to these awful things. And so when we are sharing our stories, it's not only about do we feel safe, it's what about the people who are listening to us. And this is something I teach on in my course, like how to make vulnerability truly safe. So it might be we feel safe to share. Do these people feel safe to hear? And that's why you now see some people putting a trigger warning on their posts. So this is like a whole new frontier in communication.
Okay, guys, I just wanted to do a bit of a group check-in because I'm conscious of the time, and I know we said this is until 9:30. We are running over a little bit, and we still have a bit of a closing session. So are you guys okay for an extra 5 minutes? Does anyone need to urgently leave? No? Okay, cool. Well, maybe we should move on to a bit of a round down, and then all these extra questions we can kind of stick around for after.
So as you can probably feel, there is so much to explore here, far more than 90 minutes will allow. We've tipped the iceberg, but also we've opened a big can of worms. So I want to just take a few minutes for us all to ground in. Would that be okay? So I'm going to invite you all to close your eyes. So taking a few nice breaths in, just settling back into you and noticing how this time together and everything we've shared is refracting through you. Maybe it's slowly moving through you, maybe it's ping-ponging, maybe it all feels like a lot. And I want you to let go of the desire to try and make sense of everything all at once, or to go out and make a million changes in your life. So just move into receptivity, knowing that everything we've explored today is going to begin to make sense in little moments over days, weeks, months, or even years. Oh, that's what Natalia was talking about. I get it. So just letting go of that force and that mind from trying to digest everything. Letting all the concepts that are moving around your brain leave. Knowing that everything you've taken in today will integrate naturally. Welcoming your own complex, non-linear process of healing and growing. Learning to perceive, express, and relate in ways that are peaceful and powerful. And take a few breaths in. Just connecting to your biggest takeaway from today and allowing that to form. And while that does, I'm going to read a very, very short passage called reverence. The final law of peace and power is reverence. In reverence, we offer sacred attention and care to all energy and awareness, our own and each other's. Rather than seek perfection, we strive for authenticity. Rather than seek outcome, we orient to intention. Rather than claim righteousness, we welcome all perspectives. Rather than ask others to be anywhere they are not, we meet them where they are even if that means we let them go. Rather than hold the weight of the world, we simply hold our own and stabilize within the temporary chaos that may bring. We welcome a new kind of peace, a deeper sense of compassion, reverent with our life force, our capacity, our boundaries, reverent with our expression, our words, our actions, reverent with the ownership and responsibility of our power. In reverence, we set each other free. Take a few beautiful breaths into your body and thank yourself for showing up and being curious. And I want you to come to your own internal closing of your time today by just finding one word that encapsulates your experience. And what we might do is, if it feels safe, to share that one word with the group before we finish today. So when you're ready, very present in your body in the room, return to the group and open your eyes and see if we can just intuitively go around with our words. Would you like to start?
Growth.
Growth.
Yeah, insightful.
Enlightened.
Understanding.
Fascinating.
Self-aware. Community.
Eye-opening. Thankful.
Receptivity.
Confidence.
Harnessing.
Reflective.
Generous.
And
Awareness.
For me, it's gratitude.
for me, it's renewal. So I'm really so grateful for all of you showing up and having these conversations. They're not easy. It's not a normal Tuesday night. And I think I've been working in this space for a really long time. And when I see and feel the receptivity, I feel a renewed sense of purpose. So thank you all for that.
Okay, you guys. Well, thank you all for being here. I'm not sure if that's what you expected, but that's what we got. I'm feeling very grateful for you for being here and co-facilitating this with me, and also grateful for you for putting all of your amazing wisdom into this book that we can all take home and digest and hopefully share with our loved ones, because this kind of work, like you said, once you have started your path of healing, you get to a certain point, you can then spread and help others. And I think that in a way that's kind of like this little mission that we can all embark on, maybe. So like I mentioned earlier, guys, feel free to stay back, hang out, have a drink, catch up. If you need to rush off, totally get it. Natalia is on Instagram. Her account is at Natalia_Rachel_change. And also her clinic is Illuma Health. So if you guys want to follow up in any way, do that.